Okay, kiddos, today I'm just going to continue reading Kaya, and then your activity is going to be to write the final draft of your diary entry or your letter, and you are going to turn that into me. So I'll go ahead and keep reading. If you remember, they just had the courtship dance, and Brown Deer has a crush on Cut Cheek, and Cut Cheek has a crush on Brown Deer, and so they decided to dance together. The run of, here we go. The run of salmon up the river was coming to an end. Many, many salmon had given themselves to the Nimipu. The women had packed the dried salmon into large woven bags and parfleches made of rawhide. Now they were packing up their belongings as well. Soon the women would roll up the tulle mat coverings of the teepees and take down the teepee poles. They would put everything they owned on their horses in the travois and set out. It was time to move higher into the mountains so that the women could pick huckleberries and the men could hunt for elk and deer. Kaya and her family would be part of the group traveling back to Salmon River country. Allah called Kaya to her. She looked worried. "I think I left my knife while we were working yesterday," Allah said. "I'll go look carefully," Kaya said. Kaya already had a rope bit on Steps High. She'd been riding her horse every day, keeping her tightly reined and held to a trot. Steps High hadn't once tried to buck off Kaya. But Kaya hadn't yet asked Tota if it was safe for her to run her horse again. "May I come with you, Kaya?" Speaking Rain asked. Kaya gave Speaking Rain her hand and pulled her sister up onto the horse to sit behind her. Riding bareback, they trotted away from the camp. At the river, they passed Tota and a few other men fishing for the last of the salmon. As the men speared fish, Foxtail and some other boys put the salmon into baskets. Tota stood on the bank with his back to the sun. He placed a large white stone in the current where the river was shallow. When a fish swam between the white stone and Tota, he could see its outline and spear it. Downstream, the river was deeper. Allah had been cleaning fish on the bank the day before. Kaya reined in Steps High. I'll start searching a little way down the path and make my way back to you," Kaya told Speaking Rain. "Wait here to mark where I started my search." Speaking Rain slipped off Steps High. As Kaya rode on down the path, she looked for her grandmother's knife. Steps High was tense and skittish. She shied at a garter snake crossing the path, but Kaya steadied her. When Steps High shied away a second time, Kaya reined her in. "What's the matter, girl?" Kaya asked. "What's spooking you?" Steps High snorted and pawed at the ground. Kaya shaded her eyes and looked back to where Speaking Rain had been waiting. Speaking Rain was cautiously making her way through the elderberry bushes that grew along the riverbank. She couldn't know there was a steep bank on the other side of the bushes. "Stop, Speaking Rain," Kaya called. She turned Steps High and started back. Speaking Rain didn't seem to hear Kaya's call. Were stick people leading her astray? She kept going. "Stop! Don't take another step," Kaya cried. Now Speaking Rain heard Kaya's cry. She stopped and turned. As she did, a piece of the bank crumbled beneath her feet. Speaking Rain fell backward. In a shower of stones, she tumbled into the swift river. Chapter 4. Rescued from the River. Kaya drove Steps High forward. She jumped her over the bushes and reined her in sharply, her hooves plowing the ground. Speaking Rain was struggling in deep water, trying to swim toward shore. As she thrashed, a branch plunged down in the swift current and hit her. She went under. When she came up again, she was being pulled downstream in the powerful surge of the river. Fear struck through Kaya like a lightning flash. If Speaking Rain wasn't pulled from the river, she'd drown. If Kaya tried to swim after her, they would both drown. To save Speaking Rain, Kaya's only hope was to run her horse along the bank to try to get ahead of Speaking Rain and ride into the river to catch her. Kaya gave her horse her head and then kicked her. Steps High burst forward. In a few strides she was at full gallop. Kaya leaned low over her neck, clasping her horse with her knees. What if another piece of riverbank gave way? What if her horse bucked? Steps High lengthened out and tore around the next river bend, then the next. She seemed as swift as a hawk diving from the sky. Now they were ahead of Speaking Rain, who flailed in the churning river. From here, Kaya had to get her horse into the water and then swim upstream to meet Speaking Rain as she was swept down. Would Steps High obey Kaya's command to swim? Kaya dug her heels into her horse's sides and urged her forward. Steps High crossed the beach, but paused at the edge of the water. "Come on, girl," Kaya said, giving her another kick. Then Kaya felt Steps High become one with her again. The horse moved into the icy current until she was swimming. Kaya angled her horse upstream. She held tightly to Steps High's mane to keep her balance against the swirling currents. She'd have to catch Speaking Rain as soon as she came within reach, or else Speaking Rain would be swept under the horse's sharp hooves. In another moment, Speaking Rain was upon her. Kaya reached and grasped, caught her arm. She had her! She pulled and dragged Speaking Rain over the horse's withers. Holding Speaking Rain tightly, Kaya turned her horse downstream. She felt Steps High gather herself. The horse's strokes evened out as she calmed, but Speaking Rain was limp against Kaya. Was she breathing? Kaya headed Steps High towards the shore. In a few more strokes, her horse's hooves touched the bottom. Steps High's head came up, and she climbed onto the sandy beach. She shook her head and pranced a step or two as if she knew she'd done something to be proud of. Kaya slid off her horse and caught Speaking Rain as her sister slipped down into her arms. Speaking Rain lifted her head, moaned, and began to cough up water. "You're safe, Speaking Rain," Kaya said against her drenched head. "You're safe." Tota appeared on the bank above them. He was followed by the other fishermen and by Foxtail. Tota leaped down onto the sand. He took Speaking Rain into his arms, bent her forward, and slapped her back with his cupped hand to force more water from her. Kaya's teeth were chattering. "Speaking Rain, can you get your breath?" she asked. "Uh-huh," Speaking Rain gasped. "I heard you shout and I ran," Tota said. "I saw what happened. You did well, Kaya. Your horse did well, too." "Steps High knew Speaking Rain needed us," Kaya said. "She did everything I asked of her." "She did what you asked because she trusts you," Tota said. "You've earned her trust. Remember that." Foxtail crouched on the bank. Was that a look of admiration in his eyes? "You told me you couldn't race," he said, "but you were racing like wildfire, Kaya." Kaya wasn't racing to be the fastest, Tota corrected him. She was racing to save Speaking Rain's life. Tota's words lifted Kaya's heart. He knew she hadn't acted for herself but for Speaking Rain, and Foxtail had called her Kaya, not Magpie. Kaya closed her eyes, pressed her face against Steps High's warm, wet neck, and felt the powerful pulse beating there. "Ketsi Yow Yow, my horse," she whispered gratefully. Then she held the bridle so that Tota could lift Speaking Rain onto Steps High's back, and they could take her back to camp. Alright, we're going to go ahead and pause there. So what you guys are going to do is you're going to write your final draft, as I mentioned before, of the diary entry you have been working on. Those are going to be due on Wednesday, so you're going to have the next couple of days to finish it up. But what I'm looking for, and I'll post an example as well, I don't want you to copy what I wrote. You've already written your own words, so you're going to write your own words. My example that I'm going to post is just what I want it to look like, what I think it should look like. You're going to use capital letters at the beginning of every sentence. You're going to make sure that your words are spaced 2 finger lengths apart. And you're going to write as neatly and as clearly as you can. And remember your punctuation. Every sentence should end with a period. Okay, so So I'm going to post an example, but you're just going to work on the final draft of your diary entry. All right. Good luck.